My boss replaced me with his useless nephew, thinking I'd disappear quietly. A year later, he was on his knees in my office. My name is Michael Carter, and I spent 12 years building my career in a mid-sized logistics company. I started as a junior coordinator, handling shipping schedules and paperwork, but over the years, I worked my way up to operations manager. I wasn't the flashiest person in the office, but I was reliable. I knew the business inside out, I had relationships with all the key clients, and I could solve problems before they even reached my desk. My boss, Richard Allen, had always been, let's say, cordial, but not warm. He was the kind of man who smiled at you only when he needed something. Still, I thought we had a mutual respect. That illusion shattered one Friday afternoon. Richard called me into his office. He didn't offer me a seat. He didn't even look me in the eye at first. "Michael," he said, "we're going to have to let you go." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never had a bad performance review, never missed a deadline, and had just closed one of the company's biggest deals. "May I ask why?" I managed to say, keeping my voice steady. Richard gave me a rehearsed sigh. "We're restructuring. New leadership in operations. Fresh ideas." The next Monday, I found out what fresh ideas meant. His nephew, a 24-year-old named Connor, was sitting at my old desk, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and looking like he'd never worked a day in his life. Connor had a reputation even before joining: lazy, entitled, and completely out of his depth. But he had one advantage: he was Richard's sister's son. That weekend, I packed up my office in silence. No goodbye party, no thanks for the years I'd put in, just a thin envelope with my final paycheck and a generic HR letter wishing me success in future endeavors. I went home angry, humiliated, and with a growing sense of something deeper: resolve. If Richard wanted fresh ideas, I'd give him something far more permanent. The next few weeks were rough. Job hunting at my age wasn't easy, and the industry was competitive. But I wasn't going to jump into the first offer that came my way. I wanted a position that would let me leverage what I knew and maybe, just maybe, put me in a position to turn the tables. Opportunity came sooner than I expected. A competitor, Atlas Freight Solutions, reached out to me after hearing I was available. They'd been trying to poach some of our company's clients for years but hadn't been able to make the breakthrough. With my inside knowledge, they saw a chance. The offer was generous, more than I'd been making at Richard's company, plus a signing bonus. But what really sold me was the role: senior strategic manager, with freedom to develop new partnerships. I took it without hesitation. My first move at Atlas wasn't to go after Richard directly, it was to rebuild my reputation and strengthen my network. I called old contacts, met clients for coffee, and made sure people knew I was still in the game. Slowly, word got around that I was not only employed again, but thriving. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Richard's company. Connor was making mistake after mistake: late shipments, lost contracts, angry clients. Richard tried to cover for him, but the damage was mounting. And then, 6 months into my new role, I saw the opening I'd been waiting for. One of Richard's biggest contracts, a multinational retail chain, was coming up for renewal. I'd handled that account personally for years. I knew the decision makers, their pain points, and exactly how to undercut the current offer. I put together a proposal that addressed every weakness in Richard's operation and presented it personally to the client. 2 weeks later, Atlas won the contract. It was a major blow to Richard. Not just financially, but to his reputation. Losing that account sent ripples through the industry. Other clients began to question whether his company could still deliver. By the end of the year, Atlas had taken 3 more of his key accounts. Richard's company wasn't collapsing yet, but it was bleeding. And I wasn't done. I had a plan, one that would make sure Richard felt every ounce of the humiliation he'd dealt me. But it required patience, precision, and the right moment to strike. That moment was coming. By early spring, my strategy was in full swing. I wasn't just taking contracts, I was positioning Atlas as the smarter, faster, more reliable alternative to Richard's operation. Every time his company stumbled, I made sure potential clients knew about it, though never directly enough for it to look like sabotage. I hosted industry breakfasts, spoke at conferences, and made a point of being seen with the right people. I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was becoming a fixture in the very circles Richard used to dominate. One afternoon, I got an unexpected call. It was from Greg Wilson, a mid-tier client I'd managed years ago. "Michael," he said, "I hear you're with Atlas now. We're thinking of switching providers. Can we talk?" That meeting turned into another win for us. And it wasn't the last. Each contract we took wasn't just profit, it was a piece of Richard's empire slipping away. I knew he felt it. Industry gossip travels fast, and I started hearing that he was concerned about my role at Atlas. I pictured him saying it, jaw tight, voice low. That image kept me warm on late nights at the office. But I didn't want this to end with just financial losses. I wanted him to see me face to face, to understand exactly who was dismantling what he built. The opportunity came at the annual Logistics and Freight Expo in Chicago. It was the biggest event in our sector, a 3-day marathon of networking, product showcases, and deal-making. Both Atlas and Richard's company had booths. I made sure ours was right across from his. The first morning, I walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, confident and calm. I saw Richard almost immediately. He looked older, lines around his mouth, a touch of gray at his temples. Connor was with him, trying to look busy on his phone. Richard's eyes landed on me, and for a moment, I thought he'd look away. But he didn't. He walked over. "Michael," he said, voice flat. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled politely. "Why wouldn't I be here, Richard? It's an industry event." He gave a small, tight smile. "I see Atlas is expanding." I didn't miss the slight bitterness in his tone. "We are," I said. "Turns out there's a lot of room in the market for companies that actually deliver on their promises." His smile faltered. He muttered something about having meetings and walked away. Connor shot me a glare before following. Over the next 2 days, I watched as fewer people stopped by their booth. Meanwhile, ours was buzzing. We signed 2 new clients on the spot and lined up half a dozen more follow-up meetings. I didn't have to rub it in, Richard could see it. By summer, his company had lost another major account to us. I'd expected resistance, maybe even a counterattack, but instead, Richard seemed to be retreating. I learned why soon enough. A former colleague, Anna, reached out. She'd left Richard's company after Connor botched a time-sensitive shipment that cost them hundreds of thousands. "It's a mess over there," she told me over coffee. "Richard's pouring money into fixing mistakes, and Connor's making more every week. Morale's terrible. People are jumping ship." I asked her, casually, if she'd consider coming to Atlas. She hesitated, but 2 weeks later, she was in my office signing paperwork. She wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, I quietly recruited some of Richard's best people, operations managers, account leads, even a senior logistics planner who'd been with him for over a decade. Each hire hurt him more than a lost contract, because it meant losing institutional knowledge he couldn't replace. I knew I was closing in on the endgame, but I didn't want to rush it. The colder the revenge, the sharper it cuts. Then, one September morning, the call came. It was Richard. His voice was different, less sure, almost strained. "Michael," he began, "I was wondering if we could meet. Privately." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it. "Sure, Richard. My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. He agreed. When I hung up, I felt the first real wave of satisfaction. He was coming to me now. And I had no intention of making it easy for him. Richard arrived 5 minutes early, which told me more than anything else about his state of mind. He used to keep people waiting as a power move. Now, he was the one waiting. I let my assistant offer him coffee and keep him in the reception area for a few extra minutes before calling him in. When he stepped into my office, I saw the changes up close. He'd lost weight, not in a healthy way. His suit hung looser, and his eyes had that restless, calculating look of a man trying to hide desperation. "Michael," he said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for seeing me." "Of course," I replied evenly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you?" He sat down, clasping his hands together. "I'll get straight to the point. Things have been challenging lately. We've had some setbacks, and I was wondering if there might be an opportunity for us to collaborate. I almost laughed. A year ago, he'd thrown me out without a second thought, replacing me with an unqualified relative. Now, he wanted to work together. Collaborate how? I asked. Shared contracts, maybe subcontracting certain operations to you. We could help each other. I leaned back, studying him. Richard, Atlas doesn't subcontract. We deliver everything in-house. That's part of our reputation. You know that. He shifted uncomfortably. We could make it worth your while. You already have, I said with a thin smile. Several of your former clients are now ours. Your best people, too. His jaw tightened. Michael, this isn't personal. It was personal when you fired me without cause, I interrupted. It was personal when you replaced me with someone who didn't have the first clue about this business. He looked down at the table, and for a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, Connor hasn't worked out as well as I'd hoped. The understatement almost made me choke. He's cost you millions, I said flatly. Richard didn't deny it. I'm willing to make changes. I could let him go, bring you back in. That was the moment I'd been waiting for, the one I'd imagined countless times. But I didn't want his offer. I wanted him to realize that bridge was not just burned, it was reduced to ash. Richard, I said, my voice calm but cutting, I wouldn't come back to your company if you handed me the keys. I've built something better, stronger, and far more respected than what you have left. And I did it after you told me I wasn't needed. His face went pale. I could see the weight of my words sinking in. Then what do you want? He asked quietly. I let the silence stretch before answering. I want you to understand that the people you discard have the power to become your competition. And I want you to live with the knowledge that every time you see an Atlas truck, every time you lose a contract, it's because of me. He swallowed hard. So that's it? No deal? I stood, signaling the meeting was over. That's it, Richard. Good luck with your restructuring. He rose slowly, his shoulders slumped, and walked out without another word. I watched from my window as he left the building. It should have felt like the end, but I knew it wasn't. There was one more move to make, one final step to ensure Richard's fall from grace was complete. That step came sooner than expected. A week later, one of our suppliers called me. They'd been approached by Richard's company for a major order, but the supplier was hesitant. Word was spreading that Richard was struggling to pay his bills on time. If you want, Michael, the supplier said, we could redirect that order your way. You'd get priority, and we'd feel more secure. I agreed, of course. But I also suggested they mention to Richard, casually, that I was now their preferred partner. That kind of news travels fast and cuts deep. Over the next month, the dominoes began to fall faster. Clients canceled contracts midterm, suppliers tightened credit terms, and employees left in clusters. Richard was fighting fires on every front, and I didn't have to lift a finger. All I had to do was watch. By late November, the whispers in the industry had turned into open talk. Richard's company was on the verge of collapse. Connor had quietly disappeared from the office. Rumor had it he'd taken an extended leave of absence, which in reality meant Richard had finally forced him out. But the damage was done. Without a competent operations head, the company's internal chaos only deepened. I started hearing stories from former employees, missed payrolls, frantic calls to clients begging for extensions, even Richard himself driving a delivery truck one weekend to fulfill an urgent order. That image stuck with me. The man who once dismissed me as replaceable was now scrambling to do the grunt work I'd mastered years ago. One afternoon, as I was finishing a call, my assistant buzzed me. Michael, she said hesitantly, Richard Allen is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he looks like it's important. I told her to send him in. He stepped into my office looking worse than before, unshaven, his suit wrinkled, his tie askew. His eyes darted around the room, like he was bracing himself. Michael, he began, his voice low, I need your help. I didn't say anything, letting him fill the silence. We're about to lose our biggest remaining account. If that happens, I don't know how we'll survive. I was hoping, maybe you could take over the contract. Keep it in the family, so to speak. I almost smiled at the irony. Now he was talking about keeping things in the family. Why would I do that? I asked. Because if we lose them, I'll have to shut down completely. People will lose jobs. Some of them are good people, Michael. They don't deserve this. I studied him for a long moment. Neither did I said finally. He flinched at that. I'll sign over the account to you, he said quickly. All I'm asking is you give me a small finder's fee, enough to cover the transition. After that, I'm out. I leaned forward. You're asking me to pay you so I can take your last client? He didn't answer, just looked down at the floor. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about saving the company anymore. This was about salvaging what little pride he had left by pretending it was a business arrangement, not a surrender. I decided to strip even that from him. Richard, I said, if your client comes to us, we'll take them. But I won't pay you a cent. And when they ask why they should switch, I'll tell them the truth, that your company can't deliver anymore. He looked up sharply. That's cruel. No, I said evenly. It's honest. And it's exactly what you taught me. Business is business. For a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, his shoulders sagged, and he nodded. I guess I deserve that. You do, I said, my voice like ice. He stood, moving slowly toward the door. I'll tell them to expect your call, he muttered before leaving. 3 weeks later, that client was ours. Richard's company folded before the end of the quarter. No press release, no grand announcement, just a quiet removal of their name from industry directories and a permanently closed sign on the front door. I should have felt triumphant. And in a way, I did. But there was one final image I wanted burned into Richard's memory, something that would replay in his mind every time he thought about me. I planned it carefully. And when the moment came, it was even better than I'd imagined. The annual Industry Awards dinner was held in late January. It was a black-tie event, filled with executives, clients, and media. Richard used to attend every year, usually sitting at one of the prime tables near the stage. This year, I'd been invited to sit front and center, right next to the keynote speaker. Atlas Freight Solutions was up for 2 major awards, including Logistics Company of the Year. I made sure to arrive early, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see the room fill from my position of prominence. 15 minutes before the program started, I saw him. Richard walked in alone. No Connor, no employees, just him. He was wearing the same tuxedo I'd seen him in years before, but it hung looser now, and the confident posture he once carried had been replaced by something smaller, diminished. He scanned the room, clearly looking for a place to sit. His eyes found mine. For a brief second, something flickered there: resentment, recognition, maybe even regret. Then he looked away. As the dinner began, awards were announced for various categories. When Atlas's name was called for Best Client Retention, I walked to the stage to accept. The applause was strong, the cameras flashing. I gave a short, measured speech about integrity, reliability, and valuing the people who make a company successful. I didn't look at Richard, but I knew he was hearing every word. Then came the final award of the night: Logistics Company of the Year. When Atlas was announced as the winner, I stood again, taking my time. This time, I scanned the room deliberately until I found him. Our eyes met. I held his gaze as I walked to the stage. In my speech, I spoke about the importance of leadership that supports its people, about how short-term decisions can destroy long-term trust. The way you treat people when you think you don't need them, I said, will determine who's willing to stand beside you when you do. I let the silence hang after that line, the weight of it settling over the room. When the dinner ended, people mingled, congratulating me, exchanging cards. I was speaking with a client when I felt a presence at my side. It was Richard. Congratulations, he said quietly. You've done well. I nodded. I have. He hesitated, then added, I suppose this is goodbye. It was goodbye a long time ago, I said. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just gave a small nod and walked away. I watched as he left the ballroom, his figure small against the tall doors, swallowed by the night outside. that was the last time I saw him in person. In the months that followed, Atlas continued to grow, and Richard's name faded from the industry entirely. But I knew he'd remember. Every time he heard my name, saw an Atlas truck, or read about another award, he'd remember that he once had the chance to keep me and chose instead to throw me away. And now, I was the one sitting at the top, while he was nothing but a cautionary tale whispered at conferences. Revenge hadn't been loud or messy. It had been slow, methodical, and utterly final. Exactly the way I wanted it.